Welcome back to the shop. I'm Jason, and what you see here in front of me is almost $3,000 in parts for Project Black Pearl. That's my 2002 540 6-speed. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to cover just about everything that I can get my hands on here in the engine bay, from power steering to timing guides to engine mounts to spark plugs, oil changes, oil pans. We're going to rebuild the Vanos units. We've got our German Auto Solutions timing kit here, and anything else that goes wrong while we're in there, I'll get those parts ordered and we'll get it fixed right. I'm going to do this just like I would when I was working in the shop, and I'm going to do it in linear order. There's going to be a lot of overlap, so I won't be separating out the videos. This is going to be a bit a longer one, so there will be a couple of videos in this series. I think it's time we start ripping this guy apart.
In order to make sure I'm not scratching up the front of this beautiful car, I decided to go ahead and wrap it with some heavy-duty shipping wrapping cellophane. I do this on most of my projects and it works out really well.
Basically, we're gonna have to start by draining a bunch of the fluids. I'm gonna start with our power steering. Drain the coolant. There we go. Our power steering pump. There are crush O-rings or crush washers on both sides of these nuts here that should be replaced when you take these off. I like to leave them on here so when I'm going through my parts later, I can figure out which one goes to where. While I'm under here, I'll go ahead and loosen my AC belt tensioner since it's really easy to get to from the bottom. And while we're here, since we're gonna be pulling the power steering pump, I'm just gonna loosen these bolts on the power steering pulley. Just breaking those free. Before we try to pull the fan out, this is a E65 fan on this car, which has this ring around the outside to protect the blades. We're gonna pull the intake duct off. We got a 7mm up here. This vacuum line is supposed to have a release tab on it that's missing. This is the vacuum line that goes to the back to our one-way valve for the brake booster. Without the release tab, you're gonna have to use a pair of picks to separate it. It'll pop off. And it has a little O-ring on the inside, and then down on the bottom we have our vacuum line to our fuel pressure regulator. Be really careful that you don't break this guy. This vacuum line has been on and off a number of times. Feels like it's been lubed. Might even be silicone. This is the tool set. I believe it's a reverse thread. Yep. So another way to get these off, if you can't seem to get it off, or if you don't have the super thin wrench to do it, is you take a 32. You don't want to hit down, you want to hit with the rotation. If you look at the top of this guy, it's beat all to hell from exactly doing this before I bought the tool many ages ago. So I'm going to hit with rotation, like that, and then the hose is going to stop it. Try to pay attention to when you get to the end so you don't drop it. Should fall into the shroud as long as all the shroud is still there. Oh, that one is thinner than the factory one, so it was going to go straight out the bottom. Glad I caught that. Now we'll pull our hoses off, we'll pull our shroud out. Got one 7mm holding the hose down here, the bleeder hose to reservoir, 2 clips, and then our AUC sensor on the bottom. Now our radiator comes out with 2 8mm here at the top. There should be 4 little rubber baby bumper stoppers in there. If that doesn't make sense, you'll see here in a second. It's these rubber isolators that go in there to help keep everything from wiggling around too much. Leave these in the condenser housing. I like to pull them out of the radiator because it's likely that as you're moving stuff around, they're gonna pop out and you'll forget about them. Then you should have 2 more isolators on the mounts. You're gonna lift up and push forward. And I do that on the driver's side first. Then we need to squeeze by this AC line and then squeeze by the power steering lines on this side. I should be able to tilt up past the AC line first. There we go. And this is a perfect opportunity to get in here and clean out the condenser and all the debris that likes to build up in here. Try to improve your AC flow. I'm gonna break the bolts free on the water pump. Make sure you clean all the coolant and grease and debris off your belts before they go back in there. So this guy wired up with some speaker wire. This should be to our thermostat heater. or the electric thermostat. This car currently has an 88°C thermostat in it, probably from an M60 for performance. And then this is what tricks the DME into thinking that it's opening and closing the thermostat early. I like to use a magnetic socket for all of these. That way I don't lose them down in the valley. They can't currently fall into the engine, but as soon as we get that manifold off, anything is game at that point. To get our injector / coil harnesses off, there's a couple important things to pay attention to. As you can see, this guy is already broken. All of my connectors are just hanging out here because somebody came in here before me and destroyed it. They have these little spring clips on here that you can access to get to each one of the injectors. If you pop off half of that spring clip, they're gonna come off pretty easily at that point and you won't rip them out of the housing. Next up, I went underneath and I disconnected the starter lead and the oil level sensor, and I'm going to pull those up here because what that's going to do is it's going to give me the ability to move my entire harness out of the way while I'm working on the engine up here. Now I'm going to have to separate all this and move stuff around a little bit, but I can get this side off. We've got our lead down to the alternator. Now if you're having alternator problems on any of these M62TU engines, the first place I would go to is I'd go to my connector. On mine, the harness is cracked in a couple different locations, the outside sleeve. What was happening was water was running down and pooling up inside of the connector, and it was causing it to corrode. So I cut both of the pins out and I replaced them, and then I cleaned the housing inside the alternator. I do know the previous owner mentioned the alternator had been replaced, and I wonder if this was the problem all along, not actually an alternator. I'm gonna go ahead and tape and seal this harness up before everything goes back together. I might even pull it apart up here at the harness and put a whole new sleeve on there. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do it just yet, but that would be one place to check. So now what we can do is we can slowly move all of this, including this contraption, completely over to the side and out of the way. Now, as we move on with the rest of this project, the entire harness is out of the picture. We've got our NOx sensors down into the manifold, not a big deal. They'll never be in the way during this. The manifold's gonna come off, and there's nothing else that's gonna be fighting us this whole time. The oil level sensor and the starter plug, they're more difficult to route up if you've got the belts and everything still in here. But if you're doing this job, that's not gonna be the case. Those are too tight. Well, cross your fingers the studs don't come out. Okay, one down. All right, so far so good. I believe these are gonna be the only 11mm nuts you're gonna find pretty much anywhere on this engine. Okay, that breather port is right here at the front of the timing cover. You can disengage it. Oh geez, this line is done too. You can disengage it right here, pop it out before you lift the manifold. Give yourself a little bit of room. I'm gonna go ahead and before I pop this guy up, I'm going to spray a copious amount of air down both sides of these runners in hopes that any debris that is in there isn't going to fall down in the cylinders. So it'd be well worth it to climb up in there, double check that nothing fell down any of your runners, and then stuff something down in there to make sure that nothing's gonna fall down while we're working on it or while we're cleaning. I'm gonna clean this whole valley out, make it look really nice. That way when I come back to work on this thing in the future, I'll know what's fresh and what's not. This hurts the cheapskate in me, putting a whole towel in each one of these, but it's definitely worth it. To get the water pump off, you don't have to take the crank pulley off. You can finagle this last bolt out underneath, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. We have to pull the crank off anyhow, so we're gonna pull the crank off next. Got some T45s in here. Once you unbolt it, just pops right off. Now we can get the water pump off. Water pump has a couple different size bolts on it, so pay attention as it's coming apart to where those go. Once you get all the bolts, they just pop right off, make a giant coolant mess on your feet, and then you can hold your pipes in place and just kind of wiggle forward, try to keep from bending anything. This also helps to drain the backside of the crossover to the front of the engine to where your drain pan is. Okay, we're on to day 2. I got to work on it for about 6 hours yesterday. I'm hoping to be able to get 1 or 2 hours today. My goal is to get the valve covers off and the upper timing covers off, and then break the crank bolt free, or probably finish making my crank bolt tool. I didn't want to buy one because, well, the budget was getting pretty stretched. So what I did was I took a piece of 1/8 wall, 1 1/4 inch tubing, and a piece of 1/4 inch plate, and I drilled out basically the balancer bolt holes, and I added 3 different dowel locations in between the holes so that I can get it on here and hold it in different locations against whatever breaker bar or whatnot I'm going to use. Once I get to the point of having the engine timed and I can get everything locked down, I'll finish welding this, assuming this location is going to work with the dowel locations and everything. But I think this will be 130 bucks saved, so long as I can break the bolt free and torque it. Up top, we just have a whole bunch of 10 millimeters we have to take care of for the valve covers and for the upper timing covers. I forgot to mention, you also want to pull the spark plugs. I pulled those out, but first I shot some cleaner down in there. I blew the cleaner out with compressed air, and I made sure that nothing was going to go down inside the cylinder bore. Out of 8 spark plugs, 3 were loose. If you get anything out of this video, torque your spark plugs. They're going into a fine thread in aluminum heads. They expand and contract like crazy. It's really important. Now on this valve cover, I've already had 3 out of 8 bolts back here, or the nut tops, loose. So it's probably one of the reasons it was leaking. The other reason is these magnesium covers. As you can see, they degrade and they fall apart really bad. Magnesium oxidizes really bad when exposed to the air, and you can see here we've got a lot of chipped and damaged paint. So that's a problem all by itself. A lot of times people think that just by wrenching on these things super hard, they're going to stop leaking, but that's really not the problem. Take a look at my magnesium valve cover refinishing video so you can see how I got my new covers to look the way that they do and why specifically they leak. Okay, now this part might look like I'm going to damage the timing cover, but I'm not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the rubber seal and up, just until I hear the seal break. And then I'll just twist, and it pops right off. If it's really stuck, pull on the oil cap. There we go.
Now that is nasty.
Overall, the interior looks ridiculously clean. This might have new timing chains in it. These chains look fantastic. The cylinder heads, the cams look fantastic. I mean, there's barely any baked on oil on anything in here. It's almost like it had new cylinder heads. This is, for the mileage, 178,000 miles. This is too clean. Now what do I do? Even the gasket is nice and pliable. I've taken these apart where these gaskets crack apart into individual pieces. This gasket is almost reusable. Not that I'm gonna, but almost. This one feels pretty damn good too. Do I take it apart if the timing guides have been done? The only way to know if the U-guide is done is to pull off more, because I don't have a borescope. Okay, day 2 was a total crapshoot. I pulled those valve covers off, and I know this sounds weird, it was too clean, so that kind of bothered me. Regardless, I reached out to the previous owner. He said in his 80,000 miles of ownership, he definitely didn't do heads or cams or anything, but he did change the oil religiously every 6,000 miles with 540, and I think it really shows. I'm gonna go with that's why it's so clean in there, not because everything was replaced. While that would be good, it would kind of defeat the purpose of me going through here. So since I don't have any evidence of everything being replaced, I'm gonna do it. I went ahead and I finished up my tool this morning. I sleeved in another 3 feet on this end since my buddy Judah is gonna be on this side holding it in place. And then on the bolt side, I've got a 3/4 inch breaker bar that's gonna go into my jack handle. So I think we're gonna have sufficient leverage to get this apart. We're gonna break the bolt free before we set the timing pin or put the timing at top dead center, and then we'll just tighten it up by hand and rotate the engine with it, because we really don't want the timing pin in there. German Auto Solutions says their pin will not handle the torque trying to hold against the flywheel. The factory pin won't hold the torque, and we don't want to damage the flywheel or our timing assemblies. So we're going to do this all allowing the motor to spin free. Wish us luck. All right, this appears to be sufficient leverage. You ready, bud?
I'm ready.
Ready. All right, you just hold.
Okay.
And I'll pull. You holding all right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's going. Something's going. Okay.
Okay.
Everything's staying in place over there. There it goes. Yeah, buddy. All right.
Okay.
Watch face.
I'm so scared this is just gonna come straight down on my face.
Well, if it comes down, it'll take out the headlight and everything.
Yeah.
The welds seem to be holding up just fine.
Yeah, that's good. It's not bending.
I need a 3/4 inch socket because I'm using an adapter here and I don't really like that. Ready?
Yep. It was only really hard for a second.
Yeah, right.
Well, so we're gonna have to torque it later.
Oh, crap.
Which means
we're gonna have to tighten it this much.
we have to go the other direction.
Oh, man.
All right, we're loose.
Well, that part's not gonna be great.
Well, we'll use our torque adapter to
Yeah.
get that. The tool worked. I'm pretty happy about that.
Worked out good.
Nice. Yesterday was a wash yet again. It's day 4. No, this job doesn't take that long. You can get this done much faster, but when you're filming multiple projects at a time and dealing with all the other, things of life, things take a little bit longer. So, we got the crank bolt loose. What we're gonna do is we're gonna rotate the engine over to just before TDC. We'll go underneath and we'll put the crank pin in. Now you might notice that your intake cam kind of stutters and butters around as you're rotating. Maybe it's not rotating in time necessarily. That's because of the oil pressure inside of the Vanos units allowing it to move around. Like right now, my bank 1 intake cam, it wasn't moving as I was rotating. And it actually shows it in the repair instructions that you may have to rotate your cam into place to get it to lock down. And that's because of all of your Vanos actuation that you have. Let me show you where the crank pin goes. So on this M62 engine, you can see I put this piece of tape hanging down. That's just to remind me to double check for the crank pin. But it fits right up in here. You can see that spot right there. That's where our pin's gonna go. I actually, let's see if I can get the shot for you. I threw a paint pin in there on my flywheel so that I would remember and be able to see visually inside the flywheel where my pin marking is so that I can slide that guy in there. It's the little references like that that make a big difference when you're working on a job like this, just to make things go a little simpler. So we'll take our crank pin. This is the pin from German Auto Solutions. And we'll slide this guy in there. Now we'll just rotate slowly until it drops in, just like that. And I can visually check that one more time. We're seated nice and flat. We'll go back up top. But before we do, we are going to have to pull the lower oil pan off to get to the front timing cover bolts. So it's a great time to drain our oil.
Let's hope we don't have a strip drain pan like I did on the X5. I doubt it. Previous owner was really meticulous with their service. Even if they didn't fix the 3 dozen oil leaks on here, which I don't blame them for because these are all kind of a pain in the butt to get to. And this is a steel pan, so odds are in my favor that it's good. Oil's pretty clean too. And then we'll pull all of these bolts out. These are all 10 mil all the way around. Now, in a technical sense, you should remove the upper oil pan as well. And we're going to be doing that. But if you're just doing the timing guides, you can get away with not pulling the oil pan and just unbolting the lower timing cover from this angle. Make sure you got the seal here for your oil level sensor as well. All right, head down into the comments. 180,000 miles, 178 technically. Original timing guides, as far as I can tell, even for how clean they are. Do you think there's going to be any pieces in the lower pickup? On the M5, I pulled the lower pan off and there were no pieces, 167,000 miles, original timing guides and everything inside there. Now in my ownership, I have religiously changed the oil on that car. Who knows with the however many previous owners on that one. There we go. Just let that oil drain. All right, last chance to prove you're correct about guides in the pan. Nothing. That's fantastic news. Let's see if we can come off now. Okay, straight off. I guess I forgot to turn my other camera on, so you can look here. Look at how gross this is. Well, with the timing cover off, now I can see these guides do look pretty worn. They haven't fallen apart, but definitely worn. There's a lot of stretch on that chain. So perhaps it is a really good idea that we're doing this. With our upper timing cover off, we want to get this guy locked into place to hold everybody together. Zip tie will suffice. Oh man, now I can really see all the grossness going on back here. That means I'm gonna have more stuff to clean. Once I get the lower cover off, I'll be able to clean all that up much better back there. Do the same thing on this side. We got our 6 bolts. We're getting really close now. On our alternator, our power lug is a 17. Boy, is that full of corrosion. Dirt. We're gonna clean that up real nice. What the? Got stuck on my power steering line. This heavy sucker. Underneath here, we've got this row of bolts across the front. These are going into our timing cover. That should cover the front section of our timing cover right here. We are gonna pull the oil pan later, but we're gonna get this going first before I drop the subframe and deal with all that. We've got a couple of 13s. We've got 2 down on the bottom, 1 up here in the corner by the alternator housing, and then the rest of them should all be 10s all the way around. So let's start with buzzing out our 10s. Don't forget the one in the water pump channel. Now, I worked on a lot of these engines when they were brand new. I never did any of these jobs though because, well, they were in warranty. None of this work needed to happen when I worked for the dealer. So it has been many, many years since I've done anything. Well, 1, I've never done it to this engine. But 2, many, many years since I've had to get this deep into an engine. I guess most recently I've been working on that X5 and I've had to get pretty deep into that stupid thing. For good or bad, I suppose. So I'm referring to the instructions on the gas website, and they take you back to the BMW instructions. I'm looking for these 15 bolts. So that's what I'm looking for here. I think it's just stuck in place, unless I missed something underneath. No, it's just really tight. Okay, that bad boy slides out. Oh man, this is gonna make for a really nice before and after. This thing is dirty. Look at that thing. Look at all the debris built up back here in the coolant channel too. What is that? Yuck. This can live under here with all the bolts in it. Okay. Now, this is the part we've been waiting for. To check our U-guide, which is completely intact. These little tabs are usually, oh, there's one tab, just like that, came off in my finger. These guys are the first to break off. And there aren't any on this. There's one here, 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 and here. And that's where the U-guide attaches to this metal plate. And they're all completely intact, which is fantastic. Except this one. This one fell off in my hand. So from that standpoint, I think that, one, I was pretty lucky with this car, that at this mileage, this hasn't come apart at all. And two, now that I've seen this piece that's broken, we're gonna go ahead and dig in. I did have one little piece like this in the M5 oil pan, which tells me it needs chains and guides anyhow. That's a maintenance item. But I really want to sell the engine out of the M5, so I haven't gotten to that point. Looking down at our motor mounts, we have fantastic access down there now. Not as much on this side. We're going to clean all this goo out of here for sure. But we're going to do motor mounts and power steering lines, and the power steering lines have really good access now down through underneath, sort of. At least they'll be easier to route at this point with all of this off of here. And my oil lines here, I feel like I might want to pull these out since I have such good access as well, and replace the seals, or maybe even replace the lines if they're not too terribly expensive. I did find that this line right here has some movement to it. I'm not sure if this is a drain back or what line this is. These are pressure, I'm guessing, which is why they are stainless. Who knows? For now, I'm pretty excited. I'm going to stop it right here. Thanks for watching. This is day 4. Definitely not a 4-day job. If you were doing this at home, you could probably get it all done in a weekend, even with all the while you're in there. Filming really adds a lot to this. Plus, dealing with kids and life and family, and being a good dad is important, and a good husband. So, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, comment. I'll see you, well, right here in the next video.